if you move fast and other people are not moving as fast, they may get jealous, right? And so my chairman at one point told me, don't let people bring you down. You just keep working and you lift them up.
When saving lives is what you do, your standards are anything but standard. In fact, you set them higher than most to deliver results that patients can depend on. You refuse to compromise. We couldn't agree more. We are Edwards Life Sciences, and like you, we believe that good is never good enough. Rising to the challenge of today's TAVR patients isn't just a mission, it's a commitment. And because you set a higher standard, we set our sights on meeting you there. Welcome to the higher standard, your standard. Learn more at edwardstavr.com.
You're listening to Parallax from Radcliffe Cardiology in association with makeadent.org. Here is your host, Ankur Kalra, MD.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 2022. This is our second episode of season 4. And, I think I'm back with a colleague, a friend, a mentor, someone, who we had on the show actually in season 1. And, he's back again in season 4. And, we've obviously stayed in touch through the years. We've done some of our collaborative research together also, and we've really, come to know each other well. My guest on today's show is Dr. Naidu. Dr. Srihari Naidu is professor of medicine at New York Medical College. He is the director of the cardiac Cath labs and of the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Center of Excellence at the Westchester Medical Center in New York. Dr. Naidu, welcome on the show. Welcome back, and thank you so much for doing this for us at such a short notice.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure to be back. It's amazing that it's been 4 years. I remember, I think we were or at least I was the episodes, maybe 9 or 10 or first few episodes we did, and I thought it was an amazing experience. I did hear over the years that people have listened to that and have hopefully learned how to, move through their career, the early parts of their career. So hopefully we'll add to that today. With this, I think, timely and important discussion.
Absolutely. So, I can't thank you enough. And, it sort of befuddles my mind that it's actually been 4 years already, like you said, but you were, one of the first guests on the show, as you rightly mentioned. And, here we are. And, I think this is episode 62. So it's been a journey for us as well. But thank you for, your support of the podcast and the platform. So our topic today is a tough one, is an important one though, because, I do think, and, this is apropos of an important paper which Garima Sharma and colleagues published in Journal of the American College of Cardiology, talking about workplace harassment for, women and early career in particular, but workplace harassment in general in cardiology. And, what I want to really talk about with you, and I think the reason I chose you for this topic is because, you would not be shy in broaching this discussion, and you obviously would, hit the nail on its head and be honest about it, and sort of try and find solutions, because, that's the reason why we're having this discussion. It's important to have discussions like these on this platform, because we're not about raising or pointing fingers at each other, but really to try to get to the root cause analysis of why these, occurrences happen at workplaces amongst our colleagues. So I want to talk to you about professional jealousy. I want to talk to you about bullying at work. I want to talk to you about workplace harassment, as tools to sort of mitigate and manifest professional jealousy. So what do you think about that topic, Dr. Naidu?
No, listen, I think it's a very important topic. I think, we all go through our careers and we see this, depending on where you are, at your institution or in private practice. There's going to be occasions where either you witness this or it forms the culture that you're a part of. And it may be a significant detriment to career satisfaction. And it also may be a significant detriment to your own career advancement. And I think it does play into leadership aspects, because I think many leaders in cardiology and in medicine in general are not used to these interrelationship aspects. We're in a very competitive field. Most people who went to cardiology are used to being sort of king of the hill or queen of the hill. And what ends up happening is that philosophy in some people turns into bullying and jealousy and finding ways to cut people down as opposed to bringing themselves up. And I think part of this is personalities, how people were raised, how people were shown to succeed, either through their own success or through trying to find other people's failures. And those things end up broaching into the workplace. And I think the future is going to have to be, how do we manage these? And I think part of it is things that we as individuals can manage. We can manage ourselves, and we can try to manage the environment. And we can certainly, hopefully, hold leaders accountable for the culture that they create, so that they're able to build the skill sets to improve that culture and allow people to, really thrive at work, both individually and as a group. So that's I completely agree with ACC and everybody else who's in this, battle to try to change cardiology, because I think we definitely, have a job to do in society, but we can only do that if we're very efficient and very productive as a team. And I do think that's kind of the way of the future, and it's about time that we addressed it. Those are kind of my, initial preamble into this.
Yeah, excellent comments, and I'm gonna pick them one by one and sort of take a deep dive. You mentioned about personalities. Well, first off, granted, cardiology is an extremely competitive field, and I think, I shouldn't say I think, I know that, people who match into cardiovascular disease fellowship programs are top of the class, and, usually very competitive, have well-rounded CVs, and, want to do, look, not saying that other specialties are not competitive or not important, but, cardiology, requires a certain mindset. And, it's a great point and a valid comment that you made, that, these individuals are driven and want to succeed and want to do well for themselves. And then when you put all these highly competitive individuals together, whether it's a fellowship program or whether it's a division or a department of cardiovascular medicine or cardiology within the Department of Medicine, then, how these people interact with each other, can become challenging. And, as has been shown in data, by the paper that I mentioned earlier, unfortunately leads to workplace harassment and bullying. I do think these are manifestations of professional jealousy, but you brought up an interesting point of how people are raised and, how they are shown to succeed. And I think, I do think that's one of the key elements of this discussion, and that is, how you see success, how you define success, and what success means to you as an individual. Can you extrapolate on that a little bit, Dr. Naidu? Because I do think that's extremely important for us to discuss and talk about.
Yeah, I think in everything, we're talking about, maturity in a way, which is how do you make sure that you keep your eye on the prize. All these sayings are about how to not get distracted by everything around you. And, I think one of the challenges is that people know where they want to go, and then what you're talking about is other people trying to cut you down and, steer you off that path. So how do you keep yourself on the path in that environment? Well, one thing, of course, is to make the environment better. And we just talked about that. There's going to be ways to do that: better leadership, better environments, cultural awareness, mitigation strategies, confrontation, all those things. But those take a lot of time. So in the meantime, as that is happening, you still have to find ways to make sure that you can continue to keep your eye on the prize. So that means focusing on, where you want to go, and trying to be very cognizant of the behavior around you that might be trying to pull you down, either directly or indirectly, or on purpose or not on purpose. So what do I mean by that? I mean that people will see what you're doing, and if you happen to be doing a good job, and I'm a firm believer that pretty much everybody in cardiology is doing something great and has something that somebody else is jealous about, right? So we're not all great at everything, so everybody has talents that are better than everybody else around you, and hopefully you're focusing on those talents and moving yourself in that direction, but that'll engender some jealousy. So when people get jealous, they're either motivated internally to try to compete and do better themselves, or they act out that jealousy in ways that are counterproductive for the culture and for each other and for you. And that jealousy acting out could be indirect. What I typically see oftentimes, and I've been at multiple hospitals and I see this, is people will poke fun at the person. They will make sarcastic comments about things that could be funny, but also could be meant and are meant to put that person down and sort of take the wind out of their sails. And if that's done a little bit at a time and multiple times, the person gets demoralized and they burn out and they decide that it's just not right for them, or they start buying into that maybe they're not going to be successful. So that's the most common thing that I see in cardiology or in medicine, which is that people are not are gradually chipped down. And it's very sad to see, because they put up a fight and they try to keep moving, and then they're gradually whittled down through all these microaggressions, which is the term we talk about. And that's talked about in a racial and gender aspect, but it can be talked about in many aspects. Any types of minor aggressions that cause you to eventually lose motivation and derail your career or your well-being. So I think, how do you get around that? Well, I think it's important for other people in the environment to confront that and say, hey, that wasn't cool, or I heard that, and that is that's not appropriate in this environment. So this is not the culture I want to set. But that takes very strong leadership who is willing to confront people in a way that's delicate, so that everybody saves face, but that people realize what behavior can and can't be tolerated in the environment. I pride myself on that as much as, I think so, because I'm pretty aware of it. And I think I have the personality to be able to confront people in a way that is not too challenging of them, but rather basically saying, hey, that's not cool. And I know I know why you did that, but I think you could do better. And I think if that's said, then everybody grows. What tends not to happen is those things are not said, and then under the nose of the leader, these things are all happening behind the scenes, and it sets up a situation where there's cliques. And that's the other part of bullying. Bullying happens in another way, which is that cliques are set up. So in most hospitals, and you see this even in staff, in office staff, or in the Cath lab, or other areas where there's people working together, you'll get people who bundle themselves up into different groups. And either some people join a group where they don't want to be poked fun at, so they join the group that's poking fun. So they're not on the poking fun up side. They're on the side that kind of stays quiet and allows people to be poked fun. So that's the silent majority, maybe, but it's not admirable, but people do it. They want to stay under the radar. And then the other side is people in another clique that is trying to do their best job, but get whittled down. And so, it's hard, because the cliques are usually formed by a couple, alpha type personalities who, you're either with me or you're against me, and that's how they were raised. So that comes up to how people were raised. You oftentimes have some people very mature who, as I mentioned, try to just make themselves better. And if they see somebody else that's doing a great job, like, wow, I want to do that. How can I do that? Well, how can I make myself be able to do that kind of stuff? And let me learn from that person. Let me ask that person how they're doing that, and then figure out how to make yourself better and keep on succeeding. And then there's other people who see that and say, well, I'm jealous of that, and I can't do that, or I won't do that, or I'm not going to put the time and effort into doing that. And so I just rather that person doesn't do that. And so they find ways to do all those aggressions to bring that person down. So that's the kind of bullying I see. It's usually not bullying like you see on the playground in school where somebody's getting, their butt kicked. This is bullying that is passive aggressive bullying, but can be quite mean, over time. And this kind of bullying is sad. And I think is very important for those of us in leadership positions to set the tone of the place. And I've done that in the labs that I've been a part of. And Cath labs are notorious for having, larger than life personalities. So how do you get them all thinking of themselves as a team where they all benefit from each other, rather than a situation where they only benefit if somebody else doesn't benefit? And that's really the trick of getting rid of bullying and harassment in the workplace, is showing very obviously how each person in the environment is better off because of every other person in the environment. Now, the last point I'll make as a leader, though, is that only works if everybody is better off with everybody else there. And I do think one thing that's probably that I'm going to say that's a little controversial is that I think leaders should do a better job of curating who's on their team. I think we're very good at hiring. We never fire. And I think unlike, a sports team where, look, you're dragging the team down. We only have a certain number of people for this team. We need to find the best team. That means, I'm sorry, your contract can't be renewed. And no one does that, right? Because we're trying to be kind. But the truth is, this is how over time you end up keep creating an environment that may be hostile and toxic, because you can't, you have, almost 99.9% of leaders refuse to do that kind of a work. I'm not saying that work is easy. There's legal ramifications. Hospitals have to be on board. But to create the environment you want, you have to bring in and you have to remove. And I don't know any hospital that does that, but certainly, one day if I decide to go down that route, that's the kind of hospital and division that I would create. So I said a lot there, and it's all, kind of, freedom of free range thought right there. But let me know how that resonated with you, or whether there's anything else you want to dive into.
Yeah, no, excellent, excellent points. I'm going to start, again, parsing these out, because, there were some really important pearls that you shared. My question to you is, as a leader, how do you have that conversation with both the perpetrator as well as the victim? I'm like, you obviously don't want to make the victim feel that the victim is a victim. Obviously there should be victory in any situation in which you're made to feel as if you're the victim. And then the perpetrator, obviously is the perpetrator, unfortunately. How do you balance those conversations, and what exactly is the content of those conversations? Because I think, do you have those conversations with both those individuals in the same room, or do you have those conversations separately? What is the path forward if you have been, if you've witnessed, or you've been a recipient of such a conversation in the hallways or in the cath lab or in a workplace setting? How do you take the initiative or the lead to sort of mitigate the tension?
Yeah. I want to say right off the bat, I'm not an expert at this. This is just how I do it and what my thoughts are and how it's kind of worked for me. But I've run a lab for 15 years or more now, 16 years now. So a lot of these things fall under the director of the cath lab position if it's done well. Interrelationship management and dissipating conflict. My own opinion on that is, obviously we're typically talking about colleagues, people who are, both physicians or both staff, both nurses or whatnot. I typically help with that, staff stuff, but typically we're talking about doctors here. So by definition, they're colleagues. They're at the same level playing field. So when you talk about somebody who was bullied and somebody who was the bullying person, they both have to feel like they're on the same playing field. And obviously the bully is pushing the other person down. But the first thing you do with that person who's being bullied, is you talk to that person that, number one, you affirm that this wasn't appropriate. Number two, you affirm that it wasn't their fault. Number three, you affirm that you're going to, you recognize the problem, that it's not an individual problem, it's a culture problem, and you're going to address it. That's what you do with that person. Then, so they feel that someone listened to them who is an authority and is going, and they weren't at fault, and something will be done for it. Then I typically talk to the other person independently and say, if I knew this directly and I saw this directly, then obviously it's firsthand. But if it was hearsay, then or third party, then I'll say, hey, can you talk later today? And then I don't usually say what it's about, but when we talk, then I'll say, hey, I heard this happen. what are your thoughts on what happened today? And I'll let that person tell me what happened during the day in their own opinion. And I get a sense during that I'm listening to what they say, and I'm also watching how they say it. So this is the emotional intelligence aspects. I want to see what they said. I want to see their interpretation of that, and I want to see their body language in terms of whether they feel righteous or feel like they were trying to bully. I'm going to get that sense. And so I'll talk to the person about, if it seems like that was what happened and it was above and beyond what we want in this culture, inappropriate behavior, then it is, then we state it as such. This was inappropriate. This is not the culture this is not the behavior we agreed upon in this department or in this Cath lab or wherever you're in charge of. I don't want to, I don't want that happening again. You got to be very explicit about these things. And then, yes, then you address why they were doing that. And then, you take it as far as it goes. But a lot of that has to do with how emotionally intelligent that person is and how far they can take it. What really helps in those situations, honestly, is the leader has to have the gravitas and the respect of both parties. And this is also where leadership breaks down, which is that people are thrust into leadership positions and they may not be ready. So, I was put in, and you were also in director roles pretty early. And there's no way I had this emotional intelligence back then. I was scared to confront people. I didn't know how to really do it. I was always in situations with people supportive of me. So obviously, as a leader, you're going to have people who, want you to fail or don't want to be supportive of you until they realize that supporting you is supporting them. So what you want is to have a relationship with everybody there, whether they, like you or don't like you or jealous of you or not jealous of you, where they feel that at least they do respect you, whether they say it or not. They do respect you, that you know what you're talking about, that you're good at your job, that you're fair, that you're balanced, that you're going to have the conversation with both parties. You're not going to, quote unquote, take sides or rush to take sides, but you're also not going to tolerate certain behavior. And that also comes down to what kind of behavior you project. So I think it's very important for leaders, if you're going to have that conversation, you better have had the behavior that you're talking about, that you don't raise your voice, you have not lost your cool, you've been fair, you're friends, you try to be friends with everybody, whether they, quote unquote, like you or not. So you have to emulate the behavior, or you have to project the behavior that you want people to emulate. And if you've done all those things and you're willing to have these conversations, then usually things can dissipate. Now, you may never solve the whole problem because some people will continue to be jealous and continue to act out. And if that happens, that's where, over time you show that there's a track record of that. And I think that those people have to part ways. And again, I don't think people do it, but I think that's the way has to happen. I mean, we can't maintain a non-hostile culture while you keep hostile people. That's a problem. It's just not possible. So we have to be tougher as a business to maintain that, which means administrators have to work with us on that aspect. And, you can't just be fired because you're not bringing in an RVU. You have to be able to be let go because you're not good for the team. And I think that's going to have to happen. But what I'm talking about before that is ways to mitigate all that. And I do think that if people think that they're not quite so invaluable and they can't be let go for unprofessional behavior like this, then it breeds a situation where they're more blatant about it and carefree about doing those things. Whereas if they know that there's some consequence to this, then they will behave better and they will find ways to improve their behavior over time and actually grow later in life, which is obviously, as you know, very hard to do for most people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then what is the conversation you have with the person who, is the supposed victim? I mean, I don't want to use that word. I don't like using that word because I think, like victim is how you perceive.
No, I mean, the target. I wouldn't say victim. It's just the target of an attack, right? So the conversation is, as I mentioned, is that, you're targeted because there's something about you that is amazing, oftentimes. And so it really is a position of strength. And to be honest, right? Because bullies are operating from a position of weakness. It's covert weakness. And that's what people don't understand. It's actually the opposite. The people who get bullied, look who got bullied in elementary school and high school. That's the Bill Gates and these guys, right? And look at the people who are the bullies. They're not the most strongest people. They're trying to get away because they're not intellectually, as strong or emotionally as strong. They're trying to find another way to gain strength. And we know that now. And so the first thing is to empower the target that there's something there that is upsetting them because they can't do it or won't do it, or you have a quality that they just can't reach. And they're refusing to see the qualities that they have that maybe you can't reach. And they're not seeing that everybody has those qualities, but they're just focusing on the ones that you have that they would like to have. And that's driving them crazy. And that's making them act out. So what I would do with that target is talk to them about, well, this is why this person feels that way. And that's not to say you should change that, because all that'll do is knock you down, but rather keep going. So the conversation with that person is, you're doing a great job. You're doing all the things you need to do. And I'm glad you brought this to my attention. We'll address this. If it happens again, let me know. But keep going. And I've had that conversation because, my chief at one point, not where I am now, at a prior institution, I did experience some of this. It wasn't bad. My type of stuff has been, like we've talked about before, if you move fast and other people are not moving as fast, they may get jealous, right? And so my chairman at one point told me, don't let people bring you down. You just keep working and you lift them up. And so, meaning you just keep going. But actually, I took that to mean at that time when I was younger, just keep going and don't worry about it. But truly, there's a second angle, which is lift them up, right? And so it doesn't just mean keep going on your trajectory and doing all the great things, and they're going to look at it and they'll rise to your level. What it is that you should use your clout and what you've been growing and obtaining to find ways to share that with others so that they see very visibly how your success is also their success. So what does that mean? That means working with them on publications, not just throwing them on, but including them in that. That means if you have opportunities to do sessions at major meetings, you give other people opportunities because you've been able to bring that to them. That means you bring things to the institution that allows other people to grow at the same time. So you look for ways to succeed that also empowers, benefits, and allows other people to grow. And then if you do that over time, you're building a winning ship. And if everybody does that, the ship is everybody's growing everybody else, and we all exponentially grow in that situation. And by doing that, everybody's emotional intelligence goes up, everybody feels empowered and feels happy and feels content and therefore and feels unique and special. And that way they don't feel like tearing anybody else down, because they all have their own small hill that they're in charge of. Excellent
leadership comments there. And let me ask you something, which it was a question that I thought when you were commenting on what your former chair told you when you felt that you were targeted, and that was keep doing what you're doing, and obviously lift others. So because lifting others, you sort of, in lifting others, you lift yourself, you find a purpose. There's a bigger mission rather than just short-term goals of succeeding X, Y, and Z. But you mentioned something important, and that is keep going. And what I want to dissect a little is that when such occurrences happened to you, or if similar people in your situation, if something of this sort happens to individuals, how you dealt with it at an emotional level, and what were some of the conversations that you had with yourself, because those are the most important conversations.
Yeah. I think a lot of this has to do with your own sense of security, right? Like, how well can you self-heal? How well can you uh, look at something that happened and put it in the context of why it happened without blaming yourself for it happening? Um, and I think that's the key. A lot of people blame themselves for things that happen. I must have done something wrong to offend this person, or, what can I do to make this person like me or love me or happy? It's the same stuff we have in personal relationships, right? We have these same struggles. These are interrelationships. And I think we tend to fall into the same problems in those relationships. So if you tend to blame yourself when something happens, you're going to blame yourself in your personal relationship. You're going to blame yourself here. So I think you got to develop those skill sets to realize that when things happen, put them in the context of what percent is your fault and what percent is the other person's fault. And you can't control the other person's fault or the other person's perception or the other person's reality of what happened, but you can certainly control yours, and you can also certainly control explaining what the intention of what you did is. So, basically when these things happen, look at it. So what percent of it was your fault? What can you change that could make it better the next time of your percent fault, not theirs? And then how can you, to the best of your ability, show the other person over time, that they were mistaken in what, either your intention or what you're planning to do for the group or for yourself or for everybody. And then, if you're asking me, do you feel sad or do you feel upset? Absolutely. When these things happen, everybody feels upset. It's you feel like, we've all had this, right? If something blows up, you feel insecure, you feel embarrassed, maybe you feel, if people saw it, like, oh, are people talking about this? Or, it just, it puts a dark cloud on the day. You just want to get out of there or whatnot. But the truth is, this happens to everybody, right? So it's not unique. And so people have short memories. You got to move on with your day, and nobody remembers things, in 15 minutes, later on. And so I think just internalizing, putting in context, realizing, whether it was your fault, what part of it, what you could have done differently. So that empowers you so that, it's not going to, at least that part of it won't happen again. But then if it's mostly other stuff, then yeah, that makes you feel bad, but then you have to feel that the institution or the environment or the person you told is going to do something about it. And that goes back to what I talked before in terms of that conflict resolution aspect. I mean, obviously, if you have other significant others, go home to talk about, and try to tell them what happened. And, everybody has different coping styles, whether they want to share those things or whether they want to do it themselves internally. That's all. Each person has their own way of dealing with things that happen that upset them at work. So I think you have to call upon those coping mechanisms.
Yeah. So, the final maybe 8-10 minutes, I want to focus on. So, great comments. Thanks for a great discussion on a tough topic. I want to focus the final few minutes of this discussion on what you think is lacking, at maybe at a societal level within our field of cardiovascular medicine, interventional cardiology, and B, what you think could be done to better sensitize, colleagues, individuals, professionals within cardiovascular medicine and interventional cardiology or other subspecialties within cardiovascular medicine, so that we can have better workplace environment.
Yeah, I think we need more leadership training. Everybody wants to be a director without realizing at all how much work goes into being a director. There's all those buckets. There's quality, there's interrelations, industry relations, there's efficiency, there's cost centers, there's STEMI management. There's so many things, but they all want to be director but have no clue how to do all those things. And then they're thrust into those roles and can't manage it. And then the place is managed, like Lord of the Flies. So I think we need better leadership training that deals with this aspect, which is how to create a culture. Part of it is how to create a culture that is a growing culture where people can succeed and be efficient and all be part of the team. And if you do all that, then everything rises. The hospital's happier, the staff, the nurses are happier. They don't want to see the doctors fighting. It just causes them to fight because they start going into different cliques on which team they're on, right? So I think we need that. So we've done tons of boot camps and training and leadership stuff, not leadership, Cath lab director stuff, but it all focused on the nuts and bolts of the job without, I think, focusing on this aspect. So I think ACC and SCAI probably should have training in this, or at least offer training in conflict resolution. And I do know actually there's a survey going around about this. So you're going to see it probably on the quality improvement SCAI committee. There is a survey that they're tackling this issue of conflicts in the Cath lab at least. I know this Parallax is larger than the Cath lab, but I can tell you that SCAI is looking at this topic, and there's a survey that I saw that is in development. It's probably near completion, but it goes through this: where are the conflicts happening? Why are the conflicts happening? So that you can funnel that into some kind of way to teach people what to look for. What are the common things that happen? Common strategies to mitigate them and to grow past them, and that all needs to get out there to the leaders in cardiology, because I think we can be so much more productive if we didn't have this. This is so distracting to the mission and to our own, RVU development and productivity and success as academic or private practice careers. It definitely detracts both emotionally as well as, objectively from the job. And so I think there's a lot of waste. This is a waste in the system. It's a lot of distraction that wastes the system and makes us fight amongst ourselves. And I think a lot can be gained from that, not just in terms of making our jobs better, but also in our ability to organize as a community to, really fight the real problems, which are outside of cardiology or outside of medicine that limit, how effective we can be in healthcare. And we see that on the global scale right now, that we are a small voice in a healthcare industry, and it's probably because we're all fighting amongst ourselves. So I think, I think we need to go in that direction, because that's what also the pandemic showed us, that we need to organize. And the first part of organizing is actually not fighting each other. And so we need to do that within each of the specialties, then as a group, all the specialties together, and then as an organized medicine. So I think that's where the future is going, but it starts in each of the workplaces.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wish doctors were a collective, one voice and a uniform voice. And, unfortunately, we're not there yet, but we obviously can aspire to be there. Because, from the outside, we're viewed as a healthcare industry, like you said. And, there's a lot of infighting, and we're not making any headway. We're also not making a rosy picture of, who we are as a healthcare, provider workforce. So, are there any, you mentioned boot camps, perhaps with the Cath lab staff or perhaps with the fellows, but are there any departmental-wide initiatives or actions or programs that you've run, or you aspire to run, or you've proposed, or are currently working on, which address this issue head on? Because again, it's a tough topic to broach, it's a tough topic to discuss, but it's ubiquitous, as you and I know, and it's omnipresent. The data show it, but why aren't we tackling it more head on?
Well, I think it's just happening now. I think the women in medicine groups, women in cardiology groups are doing this. I mean, I know at least in the New York ACC chapter, we're putting together a grant with Pennsylvania chapter to look at training for women in cardiology about these kinds of negotiation skills or conflict resolution skills and that kind of stuff. So this is the other angle, which is if you're not the leader, but you're on the ground floor experiencing these things, how do you manage through them? So that has to happen. And on the other side, the leadership aspect has to happen. I think there's a lot of light on it now, also because of racial tensions. And, we're not immune to racial things also, and to gender problems also. And, we all grew up all over the world with our own biases. And, you and I are both Indian. Indians have their own biases too. If you went to India, there's lots of discrimination against other people. And so this is everywhere, and it's going to also be in the microcosm of cardiology and medicine and every place else. So these things all play into it. We have to, learn to live together, not have our biases come to bear. Even, what we talked about mostly had to do with just professional jealousy, dealing with who's better at something perceived, or who's making more money, or who's more senior, or who's on the publication, who's not on the publication, who gets to do tab or who doesn't get to do tab, or all that stuff. But under the surface, there's also all these other things that have to be dealt with, such as sexism and racism, and who makes more money and who doesn't, who's in the social clique or who's not. All those things are there. And so we have to find a way to, make everybody look at the main prize, which is how does everybody do better together when the department's doing great, and they don't want to jeopardize that by their own little biases, because they're gaining so much more out of the team working together. So, I think the chapters have to do it, ACC has to tackle it, Sky has to tackle it, and then as that happens, hopefully the House of Medicine will do more like that. But it's going to take a long time, because medicine has been going on for centuries, and nobody has broached this topic. Nobody has broached the topic of how people treat each other in the workplace. We've all been, looked at as silos of individuals, and we just do our job and go home. But that lattice network we're part of can be brutal, and I think the time has come to try to make that better. Otherwise, we're going to lose too many people in medicine. Certainly, going to lose a lot of women. We see that all the time. And I think other races will follow, and other things will follow if we can't nurture the environment that is better for everybody.
Absolutely. Dr. Naidu, thank you so much for such a great discussion. You raised some incredible points. I'm going to have to listen to this again and, make notes as I'm, I'm listening to you, because, while I was making some notes here to ask you follow-up questions, I think the discussion is extremely rich, and there's a lot to learn, and obviously a lot to reflect as to how we conduct ourselves at our workplace environments, and what we can do at an individual level if we see a colleague either perpetrating or being the target, and then how to just foster a healthy working environment as we move forward, in cardiovascular medicine, not only scientifically, but also as a society, as colleagues. So thank you again for your pearls and your wisdom, and thanks again for doing this for us. Any closing remarks?
No, I just want to thank you for broaching the topic. I will say that I didn't know where we're going to go with this, and you're right. It's not an easy topic to dive into, and most people probably wouldn't want to. But I think that it is important. I think you're doing a great job here by getting this out there. It'd be nice. I think you're going to put this on Twitter and other places. Hopefully we'll get some comments from people to share their experiences in a fairly anonymous way, but so that we can all grow from this. And I think it starts with these conversations, and hopefully we'll get more. Thank you again.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, produced by Radcliffe Cardiology in association with makeadent.org. We aim to bring you a new angle of all things cardiology every second week. Review us on your favourite podcast app, or send your comments or questions to podcast@radcliffe-group.com. To view the series, head to radcliffecardiology.com/podcasts/Parallax. Thanks for listening.